Welcome to the APAC meetup hosted by the Bitcoin Association. My name is Qiang. I'm the Southeast Asia manager at Bitcoin Association. Today, we're going to have a wide range of speakers and projects from different fields in the BSV ecosystem. Some are familiar faces, and we're also going to be joined by a new friend. Topics that we're going to cover today has a big range. It covers from BSV updates in China, some of the maybe less well-known projects and protocols to the non-Chinese speaking communities. We are going to talk about enterprise solutions on BSV, as well as compliance tools, travel rules and blockchain analytics. We are also going to have an update from our friend on the Tuvalu National Ledger project, as well as DeFi and DEX progress on the BSV blockchain. So first, well, just a little bit house cleaning stuff. We will have a live Q&A going on. So when you have questions for our speakers, feel free to type into your questions as we go. And by the end of each section, we will look at the Q&A and answer any questions live. All right, without further ado, first, let's bring up Aaron Zhou. Aaron has joined us in February as our first China-based technical outreach specialist. In addition, he is also an engineer, a software engineer at Qiang as part of the BSV infrastructure team. Hey, Aaron, how's it going?
Hey, Ella, nice to meet you.
Yeah, great to have you here. Why don't you give a brief introduction of yourself?
Okay. Hello everyone. This is Aaron. Joined Bitcoin Association in February as a technical outreach specialist. My main work is to support China manager to telling more people, more developers, more enterprises in China about what is Bitcoin, the original Bitcoin, and how Bitcoin SV, how the enterprise blockchain platform will help the enterprise to improve or involved in their true business. As you have already mentioned, I'm also a developer for Unchained based infrastructure team. Yeah.
Yep. And then I know Aaron has been involved with BSV from the very beginning before joining BA as well, right? And one of your much liked app is called SV Cafe, which gives people a very easy Faiā on ramp in China using WeChat.
Yeah, it's a side project of myself. I joined the Bitcoin SV ecosystem at about 3 years ago, I think, at the very beginning of Bitcoin SV.
Right. Yep. And I recall like one time, you know, you were also like almost broke the testnet and created one of the, well, now it's no longer a historic big block, but at that time you're contributing to you know, a historic big block that we have in BSV history.
Yeah, in 2019, I think I have set up several stress tests on the mainnet, so big blocks comes.
Great, yeah, it's definitely great to have you. You know, now we're much more stronger, like in the Chinese speaking community as well, since it is a large market for blockchain you know, ecosystem in general, with a lot of enterprises, governments, and as well as like startup attention.
Yeah,
so
for me.
Yeah, for sure. So one thing I think, like, you know, in the Chinese BSV community and ecosystem, there has been a lot of new projects popping up, especially in the token protocol and token project space. That might be a bit, you know, less well known to the non-Chinese speaking communities. So why don't you give us an kind of a high level update on what's new, what's happening in China?
Okay, so I'm gonna to introduce the latest development progress of several Chinese projects, some hotspots in Chinese community. Recently, many Chinese BSV users, developers are focused on different token protocols. As you already know, there are many different excellent competitive token protocols built on BSV. Then I'll talk about them one by one. So the first thing is mempool badge service, which is deeply integrated with DotWallet, and also in last month, mempool has already announced and open sourced their badge oracle. The name is Touchstone, so which means anyone can run the oracle, set up the badge service by themselves as they wish. And also Zheming is in the meeting, so I will not talk too much about badge. Give more time to Lin to introduce the badge service. Okay, the next is run token, run protocol. RelayX choose it as their token protocol. So in their wallet now, it's not only supports send and receive different run tokens, but also RelayX also launched a DEX to trade them. Jack can talk. Jack is the best guy to talk more about the run tokens. So yep. no more information from me about run. The last protocol I would like to introduce is a sensible contract, which announced just a few days last week, I think, a few days ago by a company named SettlePlay. Yeah, the sensible contract contains a group of tools, developer resources, and developer documents. And also in the coming BA China bootcamp, we already prepared a whole day to telling what is the technical details and how people can do to integrate the sensible contract and how to issue tokens, something like this. Actually, there are many more token protocols more than these three, like BTP or CUP that I don't mention. Yeah, different protocols have different focus or aspects or technical solutions, but for normal users or for end users, the most important thing is how they can use tokens easily in the wallet. What can they do with these tokens? They don't care about the protocol. They don't even care about what protocol the wallet use. But for now, tokens in different wallets cannot interact with each other because different wallets choose different protocols under their considerations. And this point, from my opinion, from my perspective, should be changed or improved in the future. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for the update. It's quite interesting in the token protocol space. But I guess as you mentioned, as users, we don't really care about the plumbing behind the scene, right? It's more about what great user experience this application can bring up, and that it is powered by certain token protocol underneath. So you mentioned sensible token protocol. Are they powering the tokens on SettlePay?
Yeah, SettlePay. The name is SettlePlay, the company name. Yeah, SettlePlay, the company name.
Got it. Have you seen, which one of those token protocols have gained, some more tractions than others, or now it's still a bit hard to say?
It's a difficult question. So from a developer view, I have already tried badge service, and I have already integrated run service, and sensible is a new contract. So I didn't have tried it. So from a developer view, it's not difficult to integrate or use a token protocol, but you ask what is the best or which one is better. So this question is maybe is good for end users, which token protocol is good to use, or which protocol is can win more users. It's not a technical question. So
Yep.
so only technical saying is every protocol is not difficult not difficult to use or integrate.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. And I know you guys are you and Leslie, our Chinese country manager, are organizing this boot camp in Zhuhai, which is an island coastal city in southern China. Tell us more about that.
Okay, it's a 6 days meetup. The boot camp is aimed to collect developers in China who interested in make some innovations or develop some cool things on Bitcoin SV. The 6 days, the 6 days. And in the morning, we prepared different technical topics like what is Meta ID and how we integrate with your app, and what is the sensible contract, as I talked before, and how we can use it, something like this. And in the afternoon, it's more like a hackathon. I think different days and different subjects, or write code step by step, face to face, something like this. Gonna be a very busy week. Next week, I think it's gonna be a very busy next week.
Yeah, that sounds great. And then Zhuhai is a really beautiful city, so make sure
no
that you guys also no time to hang out. Cool. Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you so much for your update, Aaron. Great to have you here. Okay. All right, next I'm going to queue up Lin Zheming, CEO and founder of Merkle. I think we're all quite familiar with Zheming. Hi, Zheming.
Hi, Ella. Nice to meet you.
Hey, how are you?
Yes. Pretty good here.
You're in Fuzhou, right?
Yeah, in Fuzhou, and next week I will participate the boot camp in Zhuhai.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Awesome. So I know that most people know at Mempool as one of the well-known miners in the BSV space, right? But Mempool also has quite been involved in the application infrastructures, such as enterprise solutions. And recently, you guys launched a blockchain as a service platform, or BaaS. Do you want to share with us, what's the philosophy behind BaaS platform, and how do you think this is going in the future?
Okay, so the idea comes when the project BaaS come to us and ask if we can take care of the token side for them and invoice them use fiat money. So when I think more about that, we think it will create a very good opportunity for us and for the whole ecosystem, that we finally can get rid of the token side, which is not very accessible for our normal users, right? So I think when we have a platform that the users can just use the ledger part of the Bitcoin and not need to worry about the exchange rate or how to get a handful of coins, or they want to do their KYC to create an account on exchanges and looking for BSV from a lot of scammer coins. So that creates a lot of cost for the onboarding problem, right? So I think every application we're facing that in the future, because the ecosystem here is too small, and we just need to focus on those users that does not heard about Bitcoin before. So I think how to serve them better, how to make them more make the Bitcoin SV blockchain more friendly to developers that are focusing on normal people. Yeah, so I think the BaaS system, we call it not the blockchain as a service, we call it Bitcoin as a service, not blockchain. So we provide the Bitcoin ledger, the accessibility to Bitcoin ledger, the write and the read API for the application developers, and they can manipulate the ledger without using any coins. The theory behind that, the philosophy is that they can just use their own private keys and they borrow the UTXO from us. Then they can use zero fee transaction to just use the UTXO, then return the UTXO to us. So all the data are recorded using their own private key. And yeah, it is the same as it is your own coin, right? So through this way, they will not need to worry about like fee rate, like the confirmation time or any more technical things. But they still hold the control of all the data created in the transactions. They still hold the valid digital signatures by their private keys, right? So through this way, I think we only need to convince those developers, not the users, to use the ledger to create more value from the immutable global source of truth of the Bitcoin nature, right? So I think it is the philosophy that is behind the BaaS service provided by Merkle. And in addition, there's more than the BaaS because it is highly competitive. That the user, the application developer can easily swap between different service providers because all the transactions are not dependent by the Merkle services. Then they can build their own services to feed their own transactions if they think that is more suitable in the future, or they can switch to a cheaper service provider or some local service provider that can offer them much faster connection. It is all dependent on, it's all up to the developers, and we will not be able to stop them from doing it. And the cost of transaction will be quite low, right? It's just like switch to another endpoint. And the best part is that all the data, all the transactions are still there, and you will not be able to Merkle or us will not be able to censor any one of them. Okay, so that is best the best solution I think we can provide for the developers to onboarding new users. So they will not need to introduce the concept of private keys or the UTXOs, the coins, the confirmations to their new users, right? It is still too technical and complicated for normal user.
Yep, exactly. Being able to abstract away all the complexity of the underlying, Bitcoin system, I think it's quite important to just bring in. That's quite important to bring in, new blood from either the enterprise or startup world. So I'm curious, like when you're doing business development and talking to, especially like enterprise client, how are they viewing, do some kind of use cases on public blockchain? And especially with the Bitcoin as a service platform rolling out, to what level do you think, you guys still need to educate them on how Bitcoin works, or, you guys don't even talk about that anymore?
You're right. We still need to educate them about how Bitcoin works and how we can achieve much more than those permissioned blockchains or private blockchains. And yeah, they are still need to be lectured. But I think most of them are not very concerned about or very worried about the public blockchain nature in their applications. You see, because they do not need to get permissions from others or to form a committee that control everything to make a permissioned blockchain, right? There is nothing political involved. So it will be very easy to start for them to adopt the ledger, to just use it, right? So my main customer, I'm onboarding several customers right now. They just think about how to scale up and how to keep the cost of every transaction down, and they will calculate the benefit from using the ledger to the cost of writing to the writing using the Bitcoin, pay for the service fee. So the main benefit here is that if the usage of the ledger, the utility, creates more value than the cost, then it will be profitable to use the ledger. And yeah, we definitely we have several competitions among the blockchain industry, and we are the cheapest one, I think. So that is a very good starting point that they were getting to know about how Bitcoin can be, and because they do not have to involve coins in their business, so there will be not be any regulation issue for them, right?
For sure.
Yeah.
And Aaron mentioned earlier about a batch protocol as well. And I know like you guys are also looking at various use cases for batch protocol. Can you provide us some details on, what are the use cases that you guys are, using the batch protocol for, and why it's why people should consider batch versus other protocols out there?
Okay, so I'll talk a little more about our batch service. So the philosophy behind batch service is that whether could we get rid of the layer 2 validation service to provide a purely level 1 solution. I think it will be very hard to doing so without modifying the protocol. So if we could not, just get rid of the layer 2, why not make more use of the level 2, but to reduce the cost of the level 2 infrastructure. So we use the batch system. That basically the principle of the batch is that it is a UTXO token that span from the Genesis transaction, and we colored every UTXO, every coins with actual data that represents the coins, the value of the token. So when the user need to validate the blockchain, the transaction it received from the sender, it must use the service to look up the UTXO subset to find out if the transaction is in the subset or not. But this service can be permissionless because you can build your own node, your archiving node or library node to get all the transaction and fill out the transaction you needed. And okay, that is what the OMI layer, layer are using. So it is a layer 2 solution. And of course, you can use a peer-to-peer solution like the Touchstone, which will reduce the burden of running a node, but still have the validation ability to help the user, especially the wallet service provider or the exchanges, to validate their transaction. The Touchstone service is a peer-to-peer layer that interchange and relay valid batch transactions to each other. So when you enter the permission committee, right? So you can talk to other batch services and get the transactions broadcasted and hand over to the layer 1 using mapping and API, submit the transaction to the miner layer, and every node there will keep their database in sync with the miner layer. But it is a very low cost solution that can help you to validate all the transactions.
And there will be other entities from the BSV ecosystem who
you can run your own.
As the batch node.
Because it is not a Oracle system that every transaction need to interact with. You don't need an Oracle to make your transaction valid, because if you sign it correctly, you build the transaction correctly, it is valid in the nature. So it's just a validating service.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool.
From this point,
cool.
From this point, I will explain more that I don't think.
Just don't get too technical.
Okay. So it's like when I want to send my transaction to Ella, right? We can trust each other, but when I send my transaction to you, I don't need to leak any information about our transaction between us, right? To any third parties. We don't need to rely on any third parties to make the transaction valid. And the receiver, Ella, you need to consult the miner about the transaction if the transaction is good, right? And of course, you can consult the validation Touchstone service if the transaction, the batch transaction is correct. So basically, it is the same. And through this way, we heavily reuse the philosophy behind Bitcoin protocol. And it is, compatible with other like smart contract or other scripting in Bitcoin. It will be very easy to embed it with other scripting technique. And it can be done offline. It can be done in payment channels, right? You don't need to have an internet connection, like the sender will not need to have an internet connection. I will just send my transaction, I sign it and hand over to the receiver, and it's done. So I think it is the philosophy behind the batch system that could create a lot of use cases. Okay, so I will talk about use cases. That when people are thinking that the batch system is for tokens. Okay, tokens is for those coins that can exchange that can be sent to my friends or to exchange for some value or just for fun, right? But in my opinion, the very low cost of the batch transaction will create a much more value that the batch can represent a kind of data flow or a kind of like permission that can be sent from other to authorize a third party to use some sort of services, and it can be a one-time use, not for the it is not for the speculating.
Right.
So,
yeah. Kind of like
so,
representing a short-term access to certain things, like software license.
yeah, software or API license, right? You can purchase 5 minutes of usage, then use the batch service. Use the batch. Then when the time is up, then the batch can be recovered, and it will be invalid, right? And we can use the batch to represent the like the vouchers, right? We will use the batch as vouchers in the e-commerce business that can help them to check all the users.
Logistics. Users.
Users coming to their website to purchase their goods, and they will have their commission distributed among those like advertisers. Yeah.
Got it, like a referral system. Cool. Yeah, I think tokens has a vast, types of use cases, and definitely not just on, random tokens. It has a lot of, use in even in the enterprise digitization process as well. But just for the be conscious about the time. Well, thanks so much for giving us such a detailed explanation of the batch protocol. I think we got one question here from Q&A section. There's someone who's interested in knowing if mempool have a virtual currency exchange license to convert fiat to BSV.
Yeah, the answer is no. We don't exchange fiat to Bitcoin SV. We exchange fiat to hash rate. Then you can use the hash rate coming from mempool to mine Bitcoin SV. And yeah, you will get Bitcoin SV, but it is the result of the hash rate.
Great. Thank you so much, Zheming.
Okay.
All right. Next, let's bring on Ian Li. Ian is the Associate Director at Merkle Science. For those who are not familiar with Merkle Science, it is a Singapore-based blockchain analytics company. They provide blockchain transaction monitoring and forensic solution to crypto asset service providers, exchanges, financial institutions, government agencies, etc. So yeah, great to have you here, Ian.
Thanks, Ella. Happy to be here.
And I know you have some announcements for us.
Yes, I'm very happy to announce that, in partnership with BSV, Merkle Science has just soft launched coverage for the BSC token, which means that anybody who comes on board using the Merkle Science platform can now use our platform to monitor BSV transactions in order to flag for potential money laundering risks. So what this means is that, companies out there, financial institutions, if you are looking to onboard BSV and you are worried about how you can provide coverage to meet, the AML regulations, well, now you have a solution.
That's great. Yeah, great to know. As we're getting onboarding more financial institutions and more exchanges, this is definitely something that they look at as a prerequisite to onboard a new asset, right? So I know there are also other service providers in the space, such as chain analysis and elliptic, etc. What would be the the short version of pitch deck pitch speech for you guys? Like how are you guys comparing to these other ones?
I love that question, Ella, because it gives me an opportunity to, talk up Merkle Science. So thank you. I think, there are definitely a couple of players in this space, right? And to be very honest, we're probably one of the newer ones. We've only been around for about 3 years, right? But one of the things that, we saw coming from, crypto previously, and our founders had used a couple of the tools available, is that a lot of the blockchain analytics solutions out there today, the way that they flag risk is by relying on a database, right? So, these companies, they would build large databases of addresses, which they have identified to belong to different criminal activity. And so whenever you do a transaction screen on their platform, they would say, okay, it's coming from an address that we know was used by a criminal. But, as anybody who's listening in this would probably be aware, the thing about cryptocurrency is that, we can very easily create new wallet addresses, right? In fact, I easily own a dozen Bitcoin wallets, a dozen, Ethereum wallets. And again, it's so easy for us to create new wallets. So relying on a database to flag risk has its limitations that if these criminals create new wallets, chances are, none of these tools are going to be able to detect that. So the problem that we wanted to solve is that, is there a way for us to detect risk that moves beyond just relying on a database? And, coming from traditional finance, we basically studied at how banks have been doing transaction monitoring for the last couple of years. And, banks never had access to the same kind of visibility that blockchain provides, yet they've been very successful at doing transaction monitoring. And the way that they do it is to design behavior-based rules that detect suspicious transaction activity, right? So we are one of the first players in the space that combines this database approach with a behavioral rule engine that can actively monitor and flag suspicious transactions based on purely their behavior, right?
That's very interesting because even if you look at traditional finance, right, like the data is just transaction, just the payments. But now with blockchain, especially for massive scaling blockchain like BSV, you can have data embedded in a transaction. So people can actually, or companies can get even better insights into, doing behavioral analysis, as you mentioned. So I think that's definitely an interesting space to look at.
No, I couldn't agree more. And I think, we're just scratching the surface of what we can do, right? At the end of the day, blockchain, I think one of its real, value adds is really this public database, right? And, some of the more exciting things that we're doing is, today we're looking at behavior for compliance purposes, but I can already imagine, right, that down the line, this behavior-based analysis will be used for things like, marketing, business intelligence, right? Tracking how, these whales are moving their funds for investment purposes. So it's very, very exciting. Yeah.
For sure. One other topic is, probably not the most exciting one, but it is very important one to think about is FATF travel rules. What, as a compliance expert, can you share how this will impact crypto businesses in general?
Definitely. So just to take a step back and for the benefit of the audience who may not be familiar with what the travel rule is. So the travel rule was introduced by the FATF, which is the Financial Action Task Force, in 2019, right? And what the travel rule requires is that if you have two virtual asset service providers, right? So basically maybe an exchange and a custodian, but basically two crypto businesses. When these two businesses transact with one another, right? So if I want to send funds from my Binance account to, let's say, a Coinbase, Binance and Coinbase must exchange information as to who the sender and the receiver is, right? So again, if I'm Binance and I'm sending funds to Coinbase, Binance needs to tell Coinbase that, hey, Ian is sending funds to Ella in Coinbase, right? And this must be done at the time that the transaction is conducted. So it's basically trying to impose the SWIFT equivalent in traditional finance onto crypto. And one of the biggest problems that this has had for the industry is that, unlike the SWIFT, which is run by the SWIFT Foundation, unfortunately, there hasn't been much guidance as to, who and how these travel rule solutions should be created. And that has led to, dozens of different providers popping up, right? And some of the problems that the industry faces is that, not all of these travel rule providers may communicate on the same language. right? So what happens if, one business is using one provider, another business is using another provider, and they don't speak to one another, right? In a situation like that, they wouldn't be able to exchange information for the purposes of travel. Another big issue that the industry faces is that although the FATF had said that travel rule needs to be implemented, this must actually be done at a country level, which means the countries themselves must introduce laws in order to introduce travel rules. So here in Singapore, the Payment Services Act that was introduced last year has a specific section on travel rule. And so now Singaporean companies who want to apply for a DPT license need to be travel rule compliant. And this becomes an issue because, what happens if a Singapore company, which needs to be travel rule compliant, tries to transact with an exchange in, let's say, Thailand, which has not yet introduced this law, right? So in a situation like that, you have the Singapore company wanting to comply, and then the Thailand company saying, hey, we don't need to comply yet, right? And if you follow travel rule, this means that this transaction should not be allowed. And so, this can be very detrimental to the industry because it's basically siloing countries off until all of them come on board. And, being that blockchain is trying to promote these decentralized ecosystem, it kind of goes against, the whole point of blockchain in the first place.
So as I understand, travel rule will be applied on, centralized virtual asset service providers, right? Do you see this might have implications to, or in the future might be, implied on decentralized apps or non-custodial products like non-custodial wallets or DeFi offerings?
Great question. So yeah, when travel rule was first introduced, the focus was really on BaaS, right? And BaaS has been, in the past defined as, decentralized businesses. But what's really interesting is that just a couple of weeks ago, the FATF have put out a consultation paper, right? Which proposes certain modifications to the recommendations that they made. And one of the major changes that we may see come in the next coming months is expanding the definition of BaaS to include decentralized platforms like DeFi products or decentralized exchanges, right? And so if that consultation comes to pass, then we will see decentralized applications like DeFi platforms being classified as BaaS. And if they are classified as BaaS, that means that travel rule will have to apply to them. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see how regulators try and impose this on these DeFi platforms when, oftentimes you may not even know who is the team behind it.
Yeah, exactly. And I've also seen in the DeFi space or dApp space, there are compliance tools and decentralized compliance tools and KYC tools that's popping up, right? So in the future, we might see, even in a non-custodial offering, people are still being able to do like KYC in a decentralized way. Is that what you're seeing as well?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that interested me moving into blockchain has always been, the idea of what you can do with smart contracts, right? And actually, we are in talks with a couple of DeFi platforms who want to be proactive in terms of monitoring the funds that are coming in and out. And so they're actually exploring an option where anytime transactions are going into the DeFi platform, the smart contract first pings a blockchain monitoring service provider like Merkle Science, who immediately gives a risk score. And then the smart contract, based on whether or not the risk score is, in an acceptable range, determines if the fund should be accepted or whether or not, withdrawal should be allowed to a unhosted wallet, right? So I think, with technology advancing as it is today, this ability to automate compliance, right, inside these smart contracts is becoming very, very exciting.
Yep, exactly. Now we have some questions for you, Ian. So so we have in the BSV sphere, there are websites or businesses that's running either like a social websites or a e-commerce website or a streaming service that offering such products and services. They don't run their own wallet. It's like a plugin wallet, a web plugin wallet that's developed by a different company such as MoneyButton or RelayX. right? So if I'm running the streaming service, would I be, do I need to comply with any regulations, or is this, more on the burden of the wallet provider that I'm integrating with?
So I think this is a difficult question to answer without, a little bit more information about the business. So why I say it's difficult is because when a lot of these regulations first came out, right, the focus was really on who's taking custody, right? And if you don't take custody, regulations seem to think that, okay, perhaps you shouldn't be covered. But in the crypto space, there are a lot of companies today that don't take custody, but facilitate transactions on behalf of businesses, right? So you have, certain trading platforms that simply allow customers to connect to APIs in different exchanges. So again, they never touch custody, but they facilitate trades, right? And so again, one of the interesting proposals to expand the definition of BaaS are to include companies that facilitate trades, right? As well as in the event that, a BaaS cannot be identified, the way that they've tried to enlarge the scope to capture organizations or businesses like DeFi platforms is to say, okay, if we can't identify, who should be regulated, then perhaps we are going to say whoever profits from it should be the BaaS, or whoever created the system that allows these transactions to take place. I want to impose regulations on them, right? I think we always need to be aware that regulation isn't focused on business, right? They're focused on, preventing money laundering, right? And if they can't find, and so they're always going to try and find someone who's enabling the money laundering to take place and impose the regulations on them. So in this example, it could be that, yes, you may not be touching the cryptocurrency directly, so you don't have any custody, but the fact that people through your platform can buy, sell, trade cryptocurrency, right, may cause you to be regulated in that jurisdiction.
Yep. There's another one, since you mentioned the communication layer for BaaS, right? I guess there's not a standard protocol yet for this. So the question is, would you think there would be a standard like ISO protocol, like a Swift type message to make the communication layer standard? Or you see, there would be, what would be the solution for that?
So there is actually currently initiatives to come up with this international standard, right? So a working group called the JWG have actually published a set of standards called the IVSM 101, right? So it was put together by a couple of international organizations who come together and said, okay, we need a common messaging standard, right? And so by and large, a lot of these travel providers have started adopting it. But again, I think the challenge that we have here is that, there hasn't been guidance as to who should be the organization to set these standards. And so currently it's still, the community has to buy into this standard. But again, without regulators explicitly saying that this is the standard that all of travel providers must use, right, we may still encounter a situation where different providers feel that, they have a better standard and they want to use theirs instead.
Sounds great. Well, thank you so much, Ian. You're definitely super knowledgeable on all that. I definitely will, I will need to bring you on to another episode focusing on travel rules. We have more questions coming up, but let's just save for the next occasion since we have three more speakers coming up. Thanks so much, Ian.
Thank you, Ella.
See you later. I see Brendan and George online now, so let's invite them online. Hey, guys.
Hello.
Hey, George.
How's it going? Oh,
good.
Nice early morning over my way. But
oh yeah, you're
good.
in Mexico.
I'm actually in Panama now. So
oh, wow.
yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. So great to have you guys here. Just a quick intro. George, our old friend, he's managing director at Faiā, and Brendan Lee, he's founder of Elas Digital and also involved in the Bitcoin Association as well. Thanks for joining us, guys.
Our pleasure.
Yeah.
So today, let's talk about the the Tuvalu National Ledger project, it got a lot of attention, and we're all very excited and at the same time curious to know what's going on. Obviously, it's a massive scale project. We're talking about national ledger, right? So, I know you guys have been working with the government together with N-Chain team to scope the project. Can you share a bit of, where do you see some of the initial use cases will be?
Yeah, sure. Brendan, do you want to start off, and I'll just bounce off of you?
Sure. I mean, I think the best way to characterize the project is really to make it clear that we're not coming in to rip, tear, bust, replace everything new, change the way everything happens. What we're really doing is basically taking the existing laws, the existing processes, the existing documents that we use to manage society in Tuvalu, and we're changing the media that we use to record and exchange those documents. So basically, we're taking what we currently use paper for, and we're exchanging the paper for Bitcoin, and we're putting those records onto the public ledger. And I mean, at a broad level, that can be used to almost explain the whole project. It really is about providing them with an alternative way of doing business that's much faster, much more transparent, and much more simple and cheaper to use without having to completely reinvent the way they do everything. Really, the process is about bringing them, light years ahead of where they are today, but with a minimal amount of change. And so that's, that's, I think, the one of the goals of the project. And it's really about a transformation of the government services that they have to this new media. And that's going to give them, we believe, a system that's much more robust. And I mean, George can talk probably more about this, but Tuvalu is quite a geographically vulnerable place. There's no part of the nation that's higher than 4 meters above sea level. And so one of the things that this gives them is a type of government record system that will simply be able to follow them wherever they need to go. And if one day they did really have to pack up and leave in a hurry, one of the things that they don't have to do is worry about packing the 500 boxes of paper that carry all of the data that makes up the history of their nation. So, that's probably, I think, the most exciting aspect of it is really the transfer into this much more robust public ledger system of making records, and both learning ourselves and then teaching them how to use it. And I think actually what's going to end up happening is we're going to learn much more from them than they're really going to learn from us. We're there with some quite, I would like to say simple tools, and they're really going to show us how they can use those tools to capture the essence of their culture and their society, and to put that on chain.
Yep, 100%. Well said, Brendan. And I think one of the things that is most exciting about this is that for a long time, right, in the Bitcoin ecosystem, cryptocurrencies in general, right, just looking at sort of the price of the tokens and just the payment aspects. But we're moving more towards the data functionality of Bitcoin, right? What it can truly do from that standpoint. And not just from like a consumer perspective, right? Most of the applications in the ecosystems have been very consumer faced. Very few have been on the government level. And when you're dealing with government, right, you really have to think like multi-generations. And I think that's what gives us more of a sense of responsibility to do things well here. So as we start moving more of our sort of energy and focus towards the data aspect, we get to, as Brendan said, learn more actually from them and how that translates into reality. I still feel like even in our ecosystems, right, there's a lot of theory that is shared. There's still very few, in my opinion, of like applicable applications for things that affect people's lives in the way that it affects Tuvalu, right? For some of the press releases and things that have gone out, there have been comments that we've been sort of monitoring over the public. And it's really interesting to see sort of what some of those comments are from local Tuvaluans and also Tuvaluans overseas in the Pacific region. And so overall, most people are quite excited about this, but of course, people still don't understand like what it is exactly, right? Because of the technical aspects. But some of, I think maybe the concerns, that have already come up from some of the Tuvaluans have been, why do we need this now? And that's a very relevant question, because there are very real needs that have to do with just general revenue, employment, etc. And some even, I think in one of the interviews that we did, they included some random critic, some academic in New Zealand, who was saying something like, oh, this is just some, buzz marketing words, and, using blockchain is not really a plan. And I think that's probably because the way that general media, capture things, they do it in a certain way. There were some inaccuracies in the articles that we couldn't approve or whatnot, but that, that's a separate issue. But one thing that guy did highlight was the plan itself actually comes from this article that I published at the end of 2019. So in all of the sort of presentations we're doing, I'm talking about sort of the backstory, how the project came to be. And in the YouTube chats, I actually shared a link to the Medium article that started this whole thing. And the blockchain aspect or the Bitcoin aspect is just 1 point out of 5. And it's actually like step number 4. So the first part of the plan actually involves .tv. So for those of you listening who aren't familiar with Tuvalu, they own the .tv top level domain. So this is actually a significant revenue driver for Tuvalu. And so it was off the bat of that, in 2022, the licenses comes up for renewal. And so my suggestion was that they actually put out a bidding war for .tv so they can see the actual market value. And then from there, get a good price, use those funds to actually funnel it into things like digital transformation efforts, infrastructure projects, etc. And what's crazy is that as of today, 4 out of the 5 steps are actually being followed, right? And that's just from a Medium article. So definitely have a look at that if you haven't seen it already. It gives context to this project and how it fits into Tuvalu's overall plans. And what they're doing is pretty amazing and pretty innovative. I think outside of the blockchain project, they've also recently, there was an article about how in the fisheries industry, they actually came up with a solution with a few other Pacific nations that actually now starts to charge other nations or other shipping crews for time as opposed to weight of fish that they catch. So other companies, markets, nations actually have to bid for time to fish in their waters. And these sort of things translate back to sort of the work that we're doing, because we can use Bitcoin to better manage the supply chain aspect of those things. Because yeah, as Unisat guys know, there's a lot of corruption that happens in the seafood industry. Yeah, I mean, that's a whole nother story. But I think that hopefully that gives enough.
I'm curious, when you guys talking to the, at the government level for digital transformation, going from like a paper-based society to a paperless society, are they kind of comparing the traditional data center route versus blockchain, or like how are they viewing, Bitcoin, blockchain? Where are they putting in their like roadmap? Like how are they thinking this? And also another one is, we're talking about storing a whole national, registry and other public records on chain. So there's a national security perspective baked into this, right? So I'm curious to, hear what you guys, from your experience of talking to the government, like how are they thinking this?
Yeah, Brennan, I'll let you share and then I'll add on too.
Sure. So I just want to get out in front of this one because I've already answered the same question in the Q&A. By putting information on the public ledger, it doesn't necessarily mean that we are making the contents of that information public. And in fact, it doesn't even necessarily mean that we're putting the information onto the public ledger at all. What we may do is just put a hash of the information onto the public ledger and have the person keep a copy of their own information. And at any moment, they can take that information and give it to somebody else who can hash it. And that person can say, now look at that hash. And you can see that that hash has been signed by the Tuvaluan government. And that is giving this piece of information that I'm showing you the legitimacy that it needs for you to accept that it's real. And so, maybe that's a driver's license or something. You give that to somebody, they hash it, you point them to where the hash is on the chain. Now, nobody can take that hash and back engineer it to figure out what your driver's license is. So it's techniques like that. That's not necessarily exactly what we're going to use, but it just serves as an example of what using the public ledger to create these types of records might mean. And so now in terms of data centers and that sort of thing, we still do need copies of the data to enable the apps and processes that they're using to actually retrieve. And while they exist on the ledger, that's not always practical to reach out to the mining network and pull that information in. And so what will typically happen is that they will have their own copies of all of that information, but that information will be held in a way that is validated using Merkle proofs and tied back to the blockchain. So effectively, it will be the Tuvaluan sub-ledger, which is a subset of the global Bitcoin ledger. And that will be still on a computer, still in a data center. But it means that if it's lost, or if that copy is somehow destroyed, it's very, very straightforward to go and get that information back. All we need is to understand how deterministically to track down all of that information again. And so, in terms of having a data center, like that's still a necessity, but it allows us to have less layering and less fallback and less hardening by virtue of the fact that the blockchain is doing all of that side of things for us. So we can keep things very lean. We can operate things quite cheaply. And in terms of people's information, I think one of the things that certainly that we're working towards is actually having people manage their own information. So rather than logging into a government website and the website giving you your own data that they keep, you'll have your own data that's on your device. And when you access the government service, it'll be your device that puts your data into that service. And then your data and that service work together to do the next thing that you want to do. And so there'll actually be a lot less data or a lot less sensitive data that's flying around, and it'll only really be the transactions that are happening, the new records being added, the records of actions or new data that's being added onto the ledger that's actually going to end up flying around the internet. And so rather than every time you go to the website, the same information being given to you every single time, that information will be held on your device. There'll be other copies of it that'll be controlled by the service provider, by the government, but it'll be done, I think, in a much more fluent manner. It'll be less. It'll be quite dissimilar to the way we do things today. And I mean, we're still kind of coming to grips with this. It's all very, very new technology, and the more that we learn about it, the more that we even have these kind of big penny drop moments of, oh, wow, if we can do that, It means that we don't need to do all of this other stuff. And so even as we're developing these applications in and of ourselves, we're discovering how much better we can make, how much better and how much more secure we can make people's information, and also how much cheaper it will be for us to operate these types of applications. So,
yep.
Yeah.
And yeah, just is it okay if I add a little bit, Ella?
Yeah,
Go-
for sure.
go- jump
Okay.
in.
Go ahead.
Yep. So, just to add to what Brendan was saying, right? It is really important that, yeah, we do take into consideration, right, the privacy aspect, because I think there is a sort of misconception. Yeah, people think that like, oh, because it's a public ledger, everything that I put is now going to be accessible by everyone, and that's not the case. And this is generally because most people just don't know enough about the technology. So, our challenge, right, at a government level is that we do also have to create the sort of front end user interfaces in a way whereby, it becomes like light bulbs. Like, the user just knows to like switch things on and off, but they don't need to know how the electricity works. But for those who dig in to how it works, we also need to make sure that we're doing things with integrity, right? And that we do have things secure in a way that, they can maintain their privacy. And I think the hashing stuff that Brendan is talking about, I mean, that's an obvious solution. But also, if you look at China, right, digital yuan, I think they're pretty much ready to go with that. And if people have any concerns, like that is gonna go ahead regardless, right? And so there is a paradigm shift where essentially you just need enough momentum. And one of the benefits of working with government, I think the Ukraine has actually just issued the world's first digital passport, where you can actually use completely the digital version, but it's also interchangeable with the physical one if needed. But I highly recommend people check that out as well. I think the news just came out recently. And these are all examples of like, as more things come out with government support, people will feel more comfortable, especially the average user, with what we're doing, right? And so that's why a project like what we're doing with Tuvalu is incredibly important, because it helps to legitimize the work that we're doing in general, right? And this is sort of the momentum we've been waiting for or wanting to get, also to be able to show what Bitcoin can really do. And I can tell you, yeah, other governments are definitely watching. They're very interested and they're asking the right questions. They're not going, oh, why BSV because of bad actors? They're like, oh, we see that you're using BSV. Tell us more, and those are the right, I guess, respectful questions, because then we can actually have, civil discourse and discussions about why. And then from their standpoint, it starts to make a lot more sense when we talk about scale, patents, all that sort of stuff. So definitely glad that like we're in the camp where, the main actors in BSV who've been pushing for that, it really is mattering, especially now. And I think it's going to matter even more over the next 5-10 years.
For sure. Well, thanks guys so much for sharing the updates on Tuvalu projects. It's a massive project and we are very interested to see what's going to happen next. Kudos to you guys, you're making history.
Thank you very much, Ella, for having us.
Thanks. All right. Last but not the least, let's bring up Jack. Hey, Jack.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yep, we can. Hey,
everyone. Hey, Ella.
Thanks for joining me. This is like early morning for you right now, right?
Yeah, that's right. I'm in the West Coast of North America right now.
Awesome. So, Jack, everyone I think knows about Jack. He's a founder and creator for RelayX, Streammanity, Cambrian Bootcamp, Output Capital, Timely.
Stop there.
Maybe I'm missing some more, but yeah, points made. So today we want to kind of focus on the recent launch of the RelayX DEX, and also some of the tokens that you're talking about quite often on social media. So first, I recall the DEX, it is the first DEX on BSV that was launched in March. And since
it's
then,
the 8th if you count screenshots, but it's the first to actually work. Yes.
All right. The first working DEX.
Right.
And since then, there has been, you guys also launched a few tokens, BSV native tokens that include both fungible and non-fungible tokens, right? So what's next? What's next for RelayX DEX?
You know, what's next sometimes is something that we discuss all the time. We have a huge list of things that we want to do, but putting the DEX out there has given us a lot of learning lessons. So, you know, initially the first ever token we ever made on Run was a USDC token. So we thought this was kind of a no-brainer. You know, it's nothing exciting, but it's something that people can use. And what we realized was that something like that has a lot of competition. Like you can trade BSV against dollars on multiple centralized exchanges with a deeper liquidity, with faster matching engine, etc. So the sweet spot that we're finding out literally by accident is, you know, in the middle of us making the DEX, there was a Schwa token. And so tokens like that, where users are just looking for some level of liquidity that they cannot find anywhere else because the token does not exist anywhere else to trade, is something that people are, you know, willing to experiment more with on the REX. So we took that finding and said, okay, what else can we do? And the idea of not launching security tokens, but launching a loyalty reward Bitcoin-backed tokens, that's another area that we think has been very interesting. And then I think we really pushed the envelope a little bit on how extreme you can take the Bitcoin backing with our own REX 1. It's a weird name, but one implies there might be more of these tokens. It's a time-limited token that is only kind of giving you a coupon or like a percentage of the exchange revenues for this first 4-month period. And my hypothesis was that it was actually going to trade very low to begin with. Obviously, it was wrong. It was traded very high to begin with, okay? Maybe because people didn't read the disclaimers and the descriptions. But the idea was that if it trades low and you airdropped it to all your users, then potentially the thinking was that some users would contact us and be like, hey, I have accumulated this much of this token. I really have a lot of good ideas for the next 4 months that you guys could deploy, and their insight will lead to financial gain for them and also for rewards for us. So that clearly hasn't played out as quickly as I would have expected, because quite frankly, the user base is small. The airdrop was very scattered. So we're learning lots of things about both REX and sort of the mechanics of tokens on top of it. We recently introduce another category of tokens with the idea of launching like event-based tickets. Like I was on the show Bitcoin Got Talent. We're talking about BitTix with a founder, Tony. And it just really opened our mind to thinking. It came to a point where, you know, me and the guy we call Output Intern, I gave him a task of, you know, why don't we think about every possible token and think about what makes the most sense for the REX? Because it really isn't as simple as porting over the Ethereum tokens over to BSV, because those things are really highly supported by a wide ecosystem, both DeFi and CeFi.
So you've been advocating for tokens, right? Where do you see having your own token? If you're running a Bitcoin app, where do you see value coming from if you issue a token to your users?
Yeah. So I always think that you can't dress up a pig. So you can like have the best incentive plan, like just click this once a week and you get these things. That's just gonna wash your numbers up. So I don't think any Bitcoin company without a fundamental like user value should deploy things like tokens to juice up numbers and have a short-term squeeze. We learned this, I think you and I saw this with Fcoin. They thought, oh, with some nice token model, Fcoin was an exchange. And for about 3 or 4 weeks, maybe it was a little longer than that, they looked like they were doing better numbers than CZ and then Binance. And even when CZ said this doesn't work, people were like, you're just jealous because Fcoin's about to beat you. And then 3 or 4 months later, we kind of lost the story. But I think the Fcoin, the price went to 0. So there's a cost of doing these tokens if you're just applying it on a business that doesn't make sense. So I would still say that you want to use tokens really to support certain things that you're trying to do that you can't target. And I've been asked this many times, like, why don't we just give users like a cheaper trading fee to begin with? Or why not just rebate them some BSVs? Why are you giving them this REX 1 token? And the easiest answer I had for that was, well, that user might not be around anymore or is a former user. So all the traditional airdrops in the crypto world, I think, when you airdrop Stellar around to all the wallet holders, there's a lot of those airdrops that are not picked up. So that's actual Stellars that are gone, or actual other tokens that are gone. Here, when we airdrop REX 1, there is no value to REX 1 other than the redeemability. And then if you don't redeem, then the BSVs that it equates to are still kept by Relay or shared by other users that are still around. So there's an efficiency of doing this airdrop. Now, this is very niche to Relay for now, but on a wider scale, I was very inspired when in 2014 or 2015, I watched a video on YouTube. It was a very simple cartoon video about Bitcoin properly or something. And it talked about, how the government gives people food stamps or things like that. And oftentimes when they give people money, those people on the streets, they just go end up buying drugs with it, and they don't actually buy food, or they buy cigarettes or something. And you can issue people a token that is not tradable, that is tied to someone's identity, but allows them a claim on healthcare, a claim on food or something like that. And so that's, again, an aspect of a conditional token that you just cannot do without a token. So I think it's naive to think that these tokens are fad. If they are fad, it's because right now we aren't able to, at scale, commercialize all these unique type of tokens. So we start with some of the basic tokens for now, but where it's going, it's a very beautiful world.
I see in your Medium post announcing REX 1, you refer RelayX as a BSV commodity earning venture.
Yeah.
Do you want to explain what that means?
Yeah, I think on my very first podcast with Charles Miller, I think I was still employed at Circle, and I told him, I'll tell you the truth of how I feel as long as you don't release the podcast until I'm out of Circle. And I said that traditionally, paper money lasts 27 years, right? And US dollar has lasted longer than that. But no matter what it is, paper money is inflating. And then even gold is not something you can use. Like Warren Buffett is correctly saying that gold is not a income generating, cash flow generating asset. So what happened was the companies that are built in this world up until now have lasted upwards to 300 years, especially banks or insurance companies. They have lasted a long, long time. Barclays Bank, my first employer, was around for a long time. And it's only been recently apparent, but for the longest time, you're like, wow, that's Coca-Cola is a legendary company. You're taught by Warren Buffett to just hold on to these companies for 50, 60 years. I think that the recognition should be made, and this is part of the trade secrets of Relay and whatever, but I think people don't believe me, so it's okay. I think the Bitcoin blockchain will last relatively forever. Hundreds of years, thousands of years, right? And look, despite all attempts to try and get rid of Bitcoin, the real Bitcoin, we've survived 2 forks and it's still hanging around. So there's reasonable expectations to think that Bitcoin will be around for hundreds of years. But the companies on top of Bitcoin, when you're building on top of an open ledger, it's hard to understand whether we are going to be, the companies are going to be around, because our users clearly on Relay are able to click a button and they go use TouchWallet instead, or they go use Money Button instead. And so we want to be structured in a way where we are earning the asset that is going to last the longest time. And traditionally, companies are earning, they sell goods in US dollars, but they know that they don't want to hold on to US dollars. So they reinvest that into their company and they try to have their stock be like a 20, 30-year stock. We don't think that might be the case. If that is the case, then that's great. But in the meantime, I think that having lived through the crypto revolution, Coinbase barely, I don't know, maybe by 10x, by 3 or 4x, barely outperformed BTC over an 8-year run. And that's maybe the #1 company of the thousands of companies that were started around the same time as Coinbase and the year or two after that. That is barely outperforming a asset that is broken, okay? It can't scale. If we are all building companies on top of a freaking fabulous blockchain that is roaring and going to scale and going to go crazy, it's going to be, I don't care how good you are as a CEO, you're unlikely to outperform that. And so the best way to do it is to kind of capture Bitcoins as you go along. And that's why we call ourselves a Bitcoin generating commodity company. I don't know what words I used.
BSV commodity earning venture. That's the exact word.
There you go. And we structure Rex 1 so that our users are incentivized not by a Rex token, but by also earning the BSV with us. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, there's so many tokens on other blockchain, but the fundamentals are not really aligned between, you know, what's driving the token versus what's driving the blockchain, whatever blockchain token, right?
Yeah.
So one last thing I want to touch upon is we've talked about several different token protocols today, and obviously RelayX has been heavily involved in the RUN token ecosystem. Wondering if you would mind sharing with us, like, what's your thought process at the first place when you decide to go with RUN?
Yeah, so we obviously, you and I met the founders of RUN at the very first Cambrian Valley. And it didn't really click to me what was going on because there was a lot of talk about jigs, and Brenton was very much focusing on, like, I don't know, emoji tokens and simple tokens that me as I wasn't really understanding that. Like I said, my first token was a USC stablecoin here. So I didn't see, you know, wasn't too involved in the token stuff. Around last summer, we knew that maybe we had given up on tokenized launching anytime soon. I mean, great for them, they finally launched, but for our timing, we were starting to look at other token protocols. And to be honest, we are absolutely protocol agnostic, and we are excited by layer 1 and layer 0 as much as anybody else, and we will be hopefully the first to add those things at scale when they're ready. But we saw how easy it was to build on RUN, so we realized that whether it was important to Bitcoiners about layer 1, layer 2, at the next level developer stage, if they don't care about, they just want to get their project launched, they're all going to launch RUN tokens. And just as we migrated from the money button protocol for Schwa over to RUN very quickly, we know that, hey, if 3 years from now and there's 100 million RUN tokens, we need to migrate them to something else, that should be possible. And I think what also triggered us was seeing, you know, we have to pivot, right? So when I saw how much tokens were taking off on other blockchains, right? Obviously, you know me, my view was that the 2017 was that kind of token era, and then Bitcoin was unleashed, and then this whole recent era was going to be on Bitcoin. Obviously, I was wrong. So if they could be on completely other chains that's clogged with $30 fees and $50 fees, and they're still doing that because it's just so easy to just launch an ERC20 token, then this is on Bitcoin, this is integrated with script on some level, then I just felt like there was going to be a huge momentum on RUN. And we chose it because some of the layer 1 things, like you said, talk about Sensible early in the show, that was just released like last week as a paper. So it was a no-brainer for us if we wanted to commercialize right away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I think in the BSV world, we tend to kind of focus on the detailed technicalities of different protocols, but in the end, it's about, you know, the product that's built on top, right? And whether people want this.
Yeah, and I think there's a huge topic about DeFi as well. So when you strain those layer 1 protocols to ask them to do more, like, well, what happens if you need oracles? What happens if you need all this kind of interoperability between contracts? And so that this whole composability stuff. Once you get into those kind of conversations, what I've heard was a lot of hand waving from these layer 1 protocols, like, oh, that's not our focus. Yeah, you're right. That is something a little bit more involved. So you realize, okay, even if I'm wrong and these things are ready, they're not ready for something significant that is market moving. Like, for example, they probably weren't thinking about their thing to make a DEX. They were just thinking about tokens to kind of represent a coupon or whatever simple things like that and do like a simple switch. So I think we're just on a different time scale on that stuff.
Yep, we got a question from the audience about certain features. He's asking, where did the USDC to BSV swap go in the wallet?
Well, that was a centralized swap service. So we've replaced that with you can switch it on ReX itself. So there's a BSV USDC pair on ReX. Liquidity is not very good, but we have some announcements on that to finally open a bridge for people to be able to mint your own USDCs with the Ethereum asset and cash out. And that will allow more liquidity to come into the system.
Yeah, speaking of liquidity, just one final comment and also question on that. Obviously, you've run centralized exchanges in the past with several centralized exchanges, and like the importance of liquidity for whether centralized or decentralized are extremely important, right? If I'm a user and the liquidity is poor on the DEX, then it probably would turn away users. Obviously, we've seen on some layer 1 DEX, there are things like AMMs, etc., to bootstrap liquidity. What are you thinking on how to do this on Bitcoin, and more specifically, like, do you guys have any plans with the REX?
Yeah, so we take the approach of like the clever but lazy approach. So we would love to see other people build these things out. So we built the first DEX. It's by no means the best ever DEX going to be. And if I was an entrepreneur in the ecosystem, rather than fighting this whole product protocol narrative, right? You can literally look at this like an amazing opportunity. Like if you're making a Volt wallet or you're making a different wallet, you could just be like, okay, rather than trying to establish another protocol and get more projects to re-mint on that, and then eventually have to convince more wallets to also adopt that protocol, you could right now jump on Run, try to make the first AMM yourself. And then all of a sudden, if you were able to accomplish that, which I hope you are, then all the people who are trading on our current REX would just be like, click a button and then take that asset and go trade on a more liquid instrument. So there's definitely a competition to liquidity. I don't think there should be a competition for protocols, right? If you buy into what I'm saying. Otherwise, you should try and convince me and Relay, the company, to ditch Run and go to somewhere else. But this is where the momentum is. So AMMs will help. It's just that is a little bit more complicated to make, but I'm sure we will make it at some point if no one's made it. But the liquidity situation on BSV, one thing can help, right? Which is this NFT boom. So NFTs by nature aren't that liquid. So you're not, so when you're trading FTs, it's like, well, I can trade on Binance, it's super liquid. Okay. Then like Uniswap is also very liquid. And now you're telling me to trade it on this Relay exchange that's really not liquid. So that's a bad comparison. But if you take NFTs, which might start from in the traditional world of painting that trades once a year at an auction, now it trades on Ethereum on OpenSea or Raribles, and there's a $40 fee. Okay, now BSV starts looking a lot better. So it's about like fitting the certain type of assets and being open-minded to the definition of an exchange, so that that's one way also of helping out the liquidity issue.
Yeah, for sure. And with NFT, not just the fee is low, but also the asset, the art is actually on-chain.
Yeah, the art is on-chain. So I think one thing I realized, and I think as founders of these products, you have insights to what's going on because you get to play with the test versions whereas you don't release it onto the public, I start to realize that I feel like if someone issues a token successfully on Rex going forward, I think they might issue 10, 100, 1,000 tokens a year. This just becomes like the way of doing business. Like even for us, right? We really didn't have this idea of selling the cards on the Rex itself, but it just becomes like, why not just sell everything on this thing? It's perfect. You can generate some pre-sales. So this Rex could easily become a Kickstarter, could easily become all kinds of things. And it's just become open-minded to that. I initially was still boxed into my kind of OK and Poloniex experiences and looking at this stuff and being sometimes discouraged by where the technology was. But if you change your frame of mind, I think it's actually going to be very interesting.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jack, for this great overview of what's going on in the DEX and DeFi space at BSV. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks so much, Ella.
All right, thanks everyone. We've gone a bit over time, but appreciate your participation, and everyone have a good evening.